All right, welcome back to Fabrication 101. We're back working on the Bronco, but we're switching. I'm going to do finish up some work on the front, as well as change a few things. The big challenge here is we're going to be taking the rod ends off of the lower links in the front, swapping them for some new beefier.
Where's the beef?
Beef rod ends to put in there, and then we're going to use those joints to make the uppers for the rear. The big challenge, or the big issue, is the new ones are 3 inches wide, where the old ones were, I don't know, like 2.5, something like that. So we're gonna have to finagle, finesse, modify, challenge, no. Do some work to those front joint mounts. I've got some ideas. Hopefully they'll work out the way I planned. And if they do, everything should go fairly smoothly, and we'll be back finishing up the rear of this thing, or at least trying to get some more work done on it. So we're going to snatch that tire off, pull the lower link. I'm going to try to do it one side at a time so I don't have to mess with a bunch of stuff. And we'll get started. You ready? All right, now that you can see, I've got that lower link mount unbolted. That axle moved quite a bit. I guess I didn't realize it moved that much when I was shooting this video. Fortunately, it couldn't go very far. Still don't have air out in the new shop yet, so I had to fire up the old hot wrench to cut this bracket off. This is really the quickest and easiest way to do it. If the plasma cutter was working, it would work as well, but obviously the good old oxy-fuel torch makes quick work of that stuff. Clean it up. I'm really getting to liking these Milwaukee tools. This Milwaukee grinder. I'm just super impressed with the battery life of these things. Sometimes I leave them unplugged not plugged into the charger for like weeks, and pick it up and go back to using it, and it works just fine. So I'm super impressed with these things. When it came time to moving this hole in the inner side of this link, I wanted to move it up and out, which is why I'm using the carbide tool on this right angle grinder here, or burr, or whatever you want to call this tool. It was probably not the best way to do this. It would have been much easier if I could have just run it straight through with a drill bit. But again, like I said, I wanted to move it up a little bit, so that the bottom of the rod end clears the bottom of this mount that hangs off the bottom there. This really didn't take very long. A good carbide burr will make really short work of this type of stuff. You can see after just a few test fits, it actually fit right in there pretty nicely, and once it's all bolted together and welded in there, shouldn't be much of an issue at all. Alright, so it really wasn't necessary for me to TIG weld these in here, but like I keep saying, I've said a bunch of other videos, is anytime I get the chance to kind of practice and intentionally practice the skills that it takes to do this kind of stuff, it's a good idea to try it, even if it's on parts that it may not seem like it needs to be done that way. It would be nice at some point to get a little rotating table or something so I don't have to stop and spin these things. But that's something for future Fabrication 101 work. When it comes to welding, TIG welding, particularly in these weird positions like this, I do have a finger switch I could put on the torch, although I didn't really want to deal with getting it out, so I'm just running the foot pedal with my knee or my other foot right here. I can't remember quite how I was doing it. That's really not the hardest part about doing these types of welds in these weird positions. In my case, the biggest struggle I was having on these days was my helmet was cold, my shop was cold, and while I was under there breathing, I kept fogging up my welding helmet and making it hard for me to see what I was doing. But in the grand scheme of things, these welded in here pretty nicely, and I think should work really well for what I need them to do. Alright, let me show you what we've got going on here. You can see I've got the bracket mounted in place. It's still loose, it's not in there tight. We've got our space set to 3 inches. You saw that I opened this hole out, put a 1 inch down to a 3/4 bushing in there. Same thing I did over here. It's just a much harder, stronger mount for these bolts. I did have to open it up to the 3 inches width. The nice thing is if I moved my bend out just a little bit, it turned this to the point where I didn't have to have any kind of a spacer in here to take up that extra space. And I think it'll weld up and be nice and strong. I'll be able to weld the inside and weld out here, and I think it should work no problems. Well, let's get it tacked, and we'll double check, make sure everything fits, and put the joint in there, and then we'll get it welded up. Alright, so you can see I've got my little spacer tool in there. I used it to make sure everything was right where I needed to be before I went ahead and tacked things in. Even using that, I'm still going to take the time to pull it all out, put the link end, the rod end in there, and make sure everything fits the way it should. Even that said, once this was all welded, it still moved a little bit, and I still had to fight it a little bit to try to get the joint in where it needed to go so I could get the bolts through. But I still think this is going to be a better setup than how it was prior to all this stuff. But just firing up the old MIG welder is probably the best way to do this. Is as much as I'd like to have tried to TIG weld this in here, I just don't think it was going to be worth it. I'd probably going to make a huge mess out of it while TIG welding. So it's just much easier to fire up the old MIG welder and knock this thing out real quick. I'm going to get to do some little bit of overhead MIG welding here, and this is one place I see a lot of people struggle with. Don't overthink it when you get overhead. It's really not any different than welding in the flat or horizontal position. Alright, got that welded up relatively nicely. Hopefully that light's not glaring in there too much, but it should work quite well. I just got to get a little bit of spatter out of the inside of that. Alright, we're going to let that cool. Probably throw some paint on it later, but now we need to work on this mount here. Fortunately, it's already wide enough. The old links, even though they were narrow, I had a spacer in there to push them out to give me enough clearance. But these holes are a 9/16 hole. The new joints are 3/4, but I'm also putting these like bushings in here. They're hardened guides, and they're nice and perfectly round. So, but this is a 1-inch hole, so I need to go from this 9/16 to a 1-inch hole, but I also need to lower it and maybe move it forward just a little bit, because there's not quite enough room between the frame rail, the bottom of the frame rail, and the top of the joint in there now. So I'm going to move this thing down a little bit and forward maybe a little bit. The nice thing is I think it's down and forward enough that I can start a 1/4-inch drill bit just below it and use a hole saw to go through here. And I'll be able to, I think I'll be able to go through both sides and get it relatively level and straight through, especially once you add these bushings in there, then it should clean all that stuff up. I'm not looking forward to it. I don't think it's going to be a lot of fun running a hole saw through here. I got the exhaust loose so I can kind of lift it up and out of the way a little bit. But I think it should work just fine. I got this. This is a slug out of a little bit larger, I think it's like 1 1/8" hole saw, but it pretty much is 1 inch in diameter. And give me a pretty good idea of where I want to set my hole to try to get it right through there, so I don't have to fight with drilling a half a hole and that kind of stuff. I think it'll work. It won't be fun, but I think it'll work. And then I got to trim some of this bottom off. I got to cut back a little bit and trim it off, because now the link will hit here, or the joint will hit here. But I think that once that's done, it should work just fine, and it should be a lot better. So without any more delay, we'll get to the fun here. Some more super fun out of position, awkward position, not really out of position, just awkward position TIG welding. Having that flexible torch head really does help quite a bit in these kind of situations. Also having yourself a good sort of heat resistant rest, a TIG finger or something like those Blue Demon Game Changer gloves, even though I'm not wearing any of that stuff in this video. All those things will help you make nicer weld, especially when you're in awkward positions where you have to prop on strange things and put yourselves in awkward positions. Again, having my helmet fog up during this was probably my biggest challenge, but obviously nothing that can't be worked around. All right, as you can see, got that one done. This link is done. That side up there is all done. You can kind of see it. Everything went pretty good. I think this will be just fine. I don't know. We'll see. I hope it works. I kind of wish I'd have thought this through a little bit better. As an afterthought, I kind of wished I'd gone that way with the mount instead of coming out this way with it. I don't think it's going to matter all that much. I don't think it'll be a clearance issue, but the tire is always rubbed on this link under full lock. And moving it in 1/4 of an inch or so probably wouldn't have hurt, but I think it'll be okay. Before I can do the other side, we're going to pull this link out so I can put bushings in here. When these brackets were all made, they were all, excuse me, they were all CNC cut with a plasma cutter. And if you plasma cut enough, you know that sometimes it, depending on the rotation, it leaves a taper inside or one way or the other with a plasma cutter. And they had to be cut just a little bit big to deal with the taper. Sometimes it's hard to drill out plasma cut holes because it leaves a very hard edge. And so I think what happened is just over time that taper, that edge got wore out enough that these links, or the bolts, started moving back and forth. So we've got these hardened like bushings or step washers, I forget what they're called. And these again are from Ballistic Fabrication. These particular ones take a 3/4 inch hole and bush it down to a 9/16 for the bolt that goes in there. So we'll get those drilled and put that link back in, and then we'll flip over and do the other side. All right, we're back out in the shop. The passenger side is all done on this thing, except I forgot to throw some paint on the link brackets where I drilled out and welded those bushings in. So now we're gonna attack the driver's side, which should be a little bit easier, I think, since now I have more of a plan. On the passenger side, I was kind of figuring out what the plan was. This side should go a little easier. Plus, I only have to do the one link on this side. I didn't have to do the upper link like I did on the other side. So we're going to knock this out real quick, and then we'll be back on to us some other important things. Time for a new filter. Got some sparkage on that filter plate there. All right. Driver's side of the Bronco front is done. Got a little bit left to do, just some dialing in things. Got to realign the front end, make sure everything's as close as a rock color should be. But everything looks really good. I do have a little bit of a loose kingpin on this side that I need to address, but I'm hoping I can just adjust that and not have to rebuild it. So anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of Fabrication 101. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Come back next time. We're going to be jumping back on that rear suspension and hopefully getting some more of that knocked out. Got a lot to do in a short time, so we're going to get after it. Anyway, we will see you guys next time on Fabrication 101. In the meantime, do yourself a favor, do me a favor, and go build something.